We have returned to talk about another generation of launch titles. This is the Optional Boss Podcast, episode 18. We're your hosts, Josh and Tyler. And Tyler, how are you today?
Oh, I'm not too bad. I'm wondering if this is like a new mini series. Are we getting to that point where we're starting series now? Because that would be a lot more structured than we seem to approach this.
Well, see, that's kind of a moot point, because I think we have series already. Like, we got the Mindy series.
Oh, true.
We've done launch titles before, so, I mean, this isn't new.
We're a lot better at this than I thought, aren't we?
I don't know. If we're already forgetting what we've done, then.
I actually had the hardest time remembering what our last episode was, so I can't really speak to that. But I'd say, yeah, I'm pretty good. I've been pretty swamped for time lately, so I have not been able to...
It's the worst.
Oh, adulthood. You just want to do so much with your time, and you never have enough of it. So, I've been keeping busy. Spring's here, which is nice. Finally, we have some weather that is appropriate to t-shirts. My skin hurts from the sun today. And it's one of those, I'm conflicted about it, and it's nice, you get to cut the grass and all that stuff, but I just want to play video games too, so...
Yeah, and honestly, that's the best thing about the Switch. You can take it outside and play video games out in the nice air.
I
just don't sit in the sun with it.
I was going to say, I would be kind of scared to see that heat warning on my Switch. I've seen it enough on my phones as is from when I leave it just in the car for like 20 minutes on a hot day.
Well, first off, don't do that. Second off, play in the shade, because your skin overheats too.
But if I play in the shade, I won't be able to play my copy of Boktai for the Gameboy Advance. Yeah, well, that's one that requires some explanation, isn't it? But yeah, I've been doing.
But it's a pretty decent segue, kind of.
Well,
today we are going to be going into the Game Boy Advance, but the Game Boy Advance launch titles, that is.
Yes.
But to start off, in your limited time, what have you been able to play? What have you been up to?
So I want to say, when we last spoke, I was kind of digging into Cult of the Lamb, just starting to feel it out, and I had also been playing a bit of Mega Man, and we might have to address, episode 16? We talked about dropped games and some reasons why we might have, and I have two things that can call back to that in the sense that, well, one, I can't really say I dropped Mega Man because I beat that, but Cult of the Lamb, I'm sorry, it got dropped really hard. And I don't feel too bad about it.
But it's not like you're not going to go back to it.
Well, not only that, too, if I'm not mistaken, the criteria that I set for myself is that roguelikes, things of that kind of nature that are a lot more, run-based, not progression-based, right? There's progression to be had, but I don't feel so bad as abandoning it because it will pretty much feel the same at the beginning and the end. And I dropped it because, one, the highly anticipated Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom came out, and I had been hemming and hawing and thinking, I am excited, but I don't know if I'll get it on launch. Needless to say, I got it on launch, and in my limited time, I've been checking that out, and I'm not going to go into great details. It is very much the kind of game that they did it again. It has that Nintendo magic, and I don't like talking about it with people who have not experienced it yet. It's new, and really all I can say for anyone who's curious about it is, yes, it's good. If you did enjoy Breath of the Wild to some degree, then this is just that, but more. So I have been really enjoying it. I will say that for someone like yourself who is a little apprehensive of open world games for the amount of stuff that they just offer to do, it's got a lot. Oh boy, does it ever.
It's one of those titles that I want to play, and I haven't played it yet. However, just the more and more I hear about it, and the more I find out how much stuff there is to it, I'm less tempted to give it a go, but yet it's a tug of war.
So
it really is.
The best way I would describe it, because compared to Breath of the Wild, the amount of stuff, because the experience with Breath of the Wild, like the whole hook of it is it was nothing but distractions, right? You really couldn't set a task in that game because it would always be like, well, what's this over here? Crank that up to 11 with this one. Now, having said that, nothing has felt middling yet. Everything so far has been really good and surprisingly fresh. This is a game for Zelda fans through and through. Like, if you people who are like, this isn't a real Zelda game, if you see some of the stuff that's in it, you will greatly disagree. And yeah, really, to just kind of sum up my thoughts on it, my first impressions within my, I don't know, probably clocked, hopefully, I would think in the 20 to 30 hour mark. And I have been having a blast. But I'm also kind of stupid with my gaming time lately, because my side game for Tears of the Kingdom, which is already a massive experience, has been Final Fantasy V, because my copy of the Pixel remasters finally arrived, and I couldn't help myself.
I get it.
Nice.
And to segue out of yours and into my stuff, just because Cult of the Lamb, I have kind of dropped. I plan on going back to it because I didn't finish the DLC. I finished the main game. So I don't know if that's really considered a drop, considering I don't usually do DLC stuff. So the Pixel remasters came, I got antsy, and I plugged it in, and I did something I never thought I'd do. And that's play back-to-back Final Fantasy games of the old style. So I played through 1 and 2 to completion.
That's a pretty impressive back-to-back. I know that if I beat one RPG, I'm pretty much spent for RPGs for at least a month or two.
Yeah, and I'm surprised at myself. I'm very surprised at myself. You want to know why? Here's another callback to episode 1. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think about a lot of my quirks that I dislike about turn-based combat was kind of fixed by speeding it up. It has a fast-forward feature, so it doesn't make you stronger or anything. It just fast-forwards your last actions that you did. So if you have one character doing magic and other characters doing physical attacks and then hit the fast-forward, that one character is always going to cast that spell, where the other ones are going to still slap the enemy. So
I know that they've made a lot of really nice quality of life improvements to these Pixel remasters, and I was incredibly apprehensive when they first launched. I'm pretty sure I've gotten into that in a previous episode, but they are something else. It's weird how they find this perfect balance of, like, it is an overhaul. You can see it visually and all that, but when you're kind of playing it, now maybe not for the ones that you did, because they were originally 8-bit, but for at least the Super Nintendo iterations, while you're playing them, you almost forget that it's an updated version because of just that weird pseudo-new but similar style.
Yeah.
It's like an old
at the same time,
pair of slippers.
I'll never understand Square Enix. They are one hell of a company. They do things right, but do it terribly wrong. Like the Pixel remasters. Why is that not a retail release? Yes, I got a physical. I don't that's great. I'm glad I have it because that is fucking fantastic. But why was there no retail? Why could you only get it from PlayAsia and the Square Enix store in limited quantities?
Well, especially with the demand for just those games to even come to console, let alone because
the demand was out real.
Yeah, so it's really sad how they handled it. I know that I've kind of peeked at like what air quote official copies are going for, and it's the cheapest I saw was like $400. So like if anyone is curious and wants the physical, like yeah, it's still not cheap, but you go the PlayAsia route, you will get it is a legitimate official copy, and on top of that, it's a little bit nicer because it has really, really nice interior art.
Yes, it does. Yeah, go the PlayAsia route if you want a physical version of that for Switch. So, I don't know about PlayStation anymore.
Yeah, oh boy, they had a bit of a mess with that. So I know.
And fun now that I can actually put down a ranking for Final Fantasy 2. Oh god, it is a slog. I mean, it's fine for a game. 1 is better. But there are some bad design choices in 2 that were just abysmal.
I was about to ask you what your thoughts on Final Fantasy II were now that you've experienced it, because I know you have a history with Final Fantasy I, if I'm not mistaken. That's a pretty game from your early childhood, so I'm sure that was just
Yes.
a good time all around, right? It's like that, but just a nice coat of paint and some quality of life improvements, right? And
Yep.
some spells actually work now. But Final
And you
Fantasy
can be
II
blinded.
is a different beast entirely, right?
Why I honestly think, and I think I posted this on Twitter, I think there's more useless doors in Final Fantasy 2 than all the entirety of Silent Hill.
So there's not it. It's a weird case. Again, it follows the trend that I mentioned of like the sequels for the NES era. They would always try something incredibly experimental, and usually that's why a lot of the sequels are, your Zelda 2, your Castlevania 2. Like they're the odd ones of the bunch. And I don't think Final Fantasy 2 at its core is a bad game, but it does have it's kind of an uphill, not a bad game, right? Because like you mentioned,
Yeah,
the
it's
dungeon design is just not nearly as good.
like every dungeon is almost a spiral, and the encounter rate is heightened a lot.
The one thing I
So,
remember from that game as well is, like you were mentioning, there's empty rooms because they're like, you could almost say they're like trap rooms. And the
yeah.
worst part about it, it's not so much that you walk into an empty room and you walk out. You walk through the door and then you are placed in the center of this large empty room that has probably an encounter every other step. Like, it is just punishing to not go the right way. And I think that's bad dungeon design. It definitely discourages exploration, especially when there's
It does.
really not much to be had. You're just trying your best to get through the damn thing.
Yes. It was a headache and a half. Like it's weird cuz I enjoyed my time, but at the same time I didn't.
It's also
One is a lot better.
it just did so many weird things, right? I mean, the big thing that's talked about is the leveling being removed in exchange for a skill progression system, which I actually think is one of the more intriguing things about it, but it just doesn't fit the Final Fantasy branding. But then you've got the other stuff like the keyword systems, and it's so weird. It's trying so hard to be something that it's not. And that's why I think Final Fantasy 2 it should have been a spin-off, but not Mana.
Should have been.
Don't give that the mantle of Mana. Thank God.
No.
So,
So on top of those two games, I wanted to take a break before I jumped into 3, and 3 is going back on a promise I made to Tyler to get him to play it more.
that's the challenge.
3 or 5.
Yep.
I forget what episode that was actually done on, but so before I jumped into 3, I wanted to. Before last episode, I think I mentioned that I was playing through the original Half-Life. Well, now I have finished the original Half-Life, I have finished Blue Shift, and I have finished Opposing Forces. I have started Half-Life 2, and I ended up picking myself up a MetaQuest 2 and playing Half-Life Alyx as of today.
Ooh.
Half-Life Kick. Yeah, I'm having a blast.
That's a pretty solid marathon and a pretty incredible way to cap it off, right? Like, just playing Half-Life alone is a good time, but playing Half-Life and then actually finally getting to experience Alyx, which is legitimately probably one of the only reasons why I would consider a VR. So, is it everything? Because I know you're never going to know until you play it.
And that's one thing, like when I originally saw Alyx, it's like, oh cool, VR game, whatever. I was annoyed that it was VR only. It's I've swapped my mind a bit. Like, I wish more people could enjoy it because VR is very limited tech for people.
It's also
And
got quite the paywall to it, right? Like, I know they're becoming a bit more affordable.
yeah, that's
but
just it.
It's a bit more affordable comparatively, right? Like, yes, $500 is cheaper than $1,500, but it's still $500 or however much they cost. But you see the point I'm driving at.
Yes, there's a giant paywall to get into it. And then because it's PC only, there's that paywall too. But I will say, after actually getting to experience it in VR, it is gorgeous. A lot more gorgeous than I ever thought the trailers gave it credit for. It's very, very weird. So one thing at the beginning is like you go down an elevator and whatnot, and there's the combine at the door when it opens. So you got to hold your hands up and whatnot and wave them around because it's VR. You're having fun. And they end up tasing you. And just like that whole scene, when you see them in proper 3D in VR, it's just so like unreal on what's happening. It's just so good.
Well, and I'm sure another reason why stuff like trailers couldn't possibly do it justice is the fact that, if you're watching a screen, flat, curved, what have you, you don't have that actual immersion of the image wrapping around your entire vision range. And just, I know, so I saw a couple months ago that someone had put out a mod for Half-Life Alyx, and it was playable outside of VR, which...
Yes.
I thought, that's really cool, but knowing how Valve does stuff, the intended experience can probably only be achieved from VR. So as tempted as I was like, no, I just won't do it, because the last thing I would want is to, especially my initial experience of it, to be not the way it's intended.
Yeah.
So
it's quite the thing. I'm very impressed. I've only been with it for an hour, so I haven't got too far or anything by any stretch. But I'm glad I can finally get to it, being such a big Half-Life fan that I am.
Well, I'm definitely very excited to find out how that ends up going for you. I know I'm just trying to find some time to play games, which oh geez. Now I will say the one thing though that Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters has done. It has made me remember that the Switch is a handheld device. Like, I know that you obviously mentioned, it's nice to take your Switch outside, but I've mentioned before, like, I primarily play it on the TV, but the Final Fantasy games, RPGs of that nature, just kind of demand to be played handheld, which I think is a great way to say, let's talk some handhelds.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So... last week, we put out a call to arms, and we asked for some of you to write into the show. And we had a few people. We had a couple people. The first is actually a friend podcast of ours, GX Podcast.
Ah, yes.
And he said he didn't actually spend a lot of time with the Game Boy Advance. But thanks to the Switch, I can play a few of them now because, we have Game Boy Advance on the... online service, right?
It actually just got a new batch of games too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I can't remember
and
which
he
ones.
wants to know what 3 GBA games are a must that isn't Mario, Zelda, or Pokemon.
What, 3?
Yes.
Ooh, okay. So
now let's just lay down.
I have
let's
like
just
a
lay
collection.
down something.
So
let's lay this down. If there is anything that Tyler is known for, it is his love of handhelds.
I'm very fond of them, yes. So this is a dangerous question to ask me. So I will keep my end simple, but what do you think initially? He said 3, right?
Yep.
Okay, if you can't come up with 3, 1 works as well, but...
I'm going to give 1.
Yeah.
Because as much as I've explored into different games and whatnot, none are coming up to mind immediately, but Castlevania Aria of Sorrow.
Ooh, okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. And it was what? No Mario or Zelda?
No Mario, Zelda, or Pokemon.
Or Pokemon. Somehow I completely ignored the thought of Pokemon being on there. Oh, okay. So I guess you gave 1, and it's one that I would have no reason to disagree with. So I will give 2 in exchange. Absolute must-play Game Boy Advance games. So the first one that would come to mind would be, and this isn't fair because it's not really playable, but Mother 3 is... something else. Like, it's kind of weird to describe a pixel-based game, but it's a cinematic masterpiece.
It is a cinematic... It is one of my favorite games, to be honest.
Yeah.
And you can get, like, bootleg cartridges of the fan translation for English.
There are ways to play it. And the only reason I say that is as a story-driven experience, there is nothing else like it on the Game Boy Advance. There's nothing else like it on a lot of consoles. And I'm not even a fan of Earthbound, but Mother 3 is something that I think that people, if they can experience, they should experience. On the flip side,
I'm not even going to feel bad about saying just emulate it, pirate it, do whatever, because if Nintendo doesn't want to give it to us, just
find a way.
Just find a way, and do it.
It's really tricky for me to think of something else, because I would think on the flip side, because the Game Boy Advance is something that's fantastic for obviously its pick up and play nature. So
you want a nice cop-out answer?
Okay, what do you got?
Oh, wait, no, never mind. That's Zelda. Never mind. I was going to say Four Swords with A Link to the Past.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to think of something that's a little bit more pick up and play, like arcadey. And
oh,
yeah,
okay.
because that kind of really fits the appeal of it. And I know that there's a lot of really small experiences, but the one that comes to mind, at least that I am personally fond of, it's not an easy game, but Mega Man Zero 3 is...
yes.
It is a peak platformer on the Game Boy Advance. I have replayed it so many times. And the beautiful thing about it is, it's, you played it, right? What would you say? It was like 3-4 hours? I would do it a little bit faster because I've done it multiple times, but...
I'd say if you set aside 6 hours, you get it done in no problem.
Oh, for sure. Easily. So that would be my recommended of must play. And yeah, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. We could say Metroid Fusion, and Metroid Fusion's incredible, but Castlevania Aria of Sorrow is genuinely the better Metroidvania of the two. So that's
Zero Mission isn't bad too, but there's a bunch for you.
I still, between the three, as much as I love those two, yeah, Aria of Sorrow, Mother 3, and Mega Man Zero 3. I think you can't go wrong with those.
No, that's a solid lineup.
That's a good question. I enjoyed that very much. I have...
And just for kicks, if you want something a little more official than Mother 3, which just do Mother 3, I'm just going to recommend Golden Sun.
See, the reason why I strayed away from that was just because it was another RPG. But I guess in lieu of Mother 3, yeah, Golden Sun. But you have to play both parts.
Yes.
Yeah, they're one game split into two. Now, I don't have a question from a viewer, but I have I made sure to inform my canonical buddy who comes to chill sometime that we were doing an episode on the Game Boy Advance launch titles and if he had any thoughts on it. And he had to say that even though he never owned one, he feels like the GBA is overshadowed by the Game Boy Color and just the regular Game Boy, and that it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And there would have been a time I would have agreed with that, but I think it's kind of going through a bit of a renaissance these days.
A little bit, yeah.
With the demand for GBA Online, and let alone just the prices that these games seem to demand now. Jeez.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, the Game Boy Advance was hailed pretty good when it was relevant, right? In the market.
It was, but it was never taken seriously as a primary way to game, right? Because consoles were very much front and center, and no one thought of the Game Boy Advance as their main form of gaming, unless they were someone like myself. So
I'm going to blame it on the fact that when did the Game Boy Advance come out?
So the Game Boy Advance, if I'm not mistaken, this is information I feel like we should have had for this episode. But I think the Game Boy Advance came out in 2001?
I was going to say 2001.
Yeah.
Yes, so North America, June 11th, 2001.
Yeah, so
there
would have been...
The fact that it didn't have a backlit screen in 2001. Mean, they had the SP. They had the SP. That's fine. I like the original handheld.
Not...
The original look to it.
Not so much that, though. I think the reason why it's not taken so seriously, or wasn't taken so seriously at the time, you have to think of the gaming landscape for 2001. This is around the time or after the debut of the PS2 and the GameCube and the Xbox. Like, gaming was much more pushing itself to the limits. So something that was a lot of pixel-based graphics, and especially, too, when you look at handhelds, a lot of people, their initial impression would be like, they're for kids, right? So it just wasn't exactly at the forefront. But at the same time, the library for this thing is stupid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like its launch lineup alone is, well, not top tier games by any means.
It's beefy.
It has some good ones in it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting launch lineup. But the weird thing I find with the Game Boy Advance, a lot of people, you talk to them and they might say they had like, 4, maybe 6 games for the thing. Like, again, they didn't really play it. So I don't think my friend is wrong in saying that it seems overshadowed, but it is getting the love that it deserves these days. And I think that's because, one, there's this greater appreciation for pixel style graphics and stuff like that. But 2, they're just realizing it was basically the sequel to the Super Nintendo.
I think there's a lot of people starting to realize that pixel art is an art form. It wasn't just there because of limitations of hardware. And with more modern AAA games coming out that are having apology messages because it's very, very buggy, people are kind of looking elsewhere for that kind of gaming experience and starting to dive into the retro stuff a little bit more nowadays. Maybe not. I'm just taking a random stab at things. And I think people are starting to realize that graphics aren't everything.
I think it's a beautiful thing. Well, you say graphics aren't anything, but I know what you mean, like in a technical push, like trying to get to like basically movie quality graphics, where I would say good graphics are still, pixels are better than good graphics a lot of times. Just play Blasphemous, people. You will know exactly what I mean. Pixel art, and the Game Boy Advance is a powerhouse for pixel. It was a 32-bit console, right? So it was pumping out stuff as good as the PS1. PS1 definitely had the memory for better things, but you work within your limitations and you get things of beauty.
So we got one more listener comment from, and I apologize because I never know how to say this name, but Lionel. And it's one game that resonates with me from the launch lineup is Castlevania Circle of the Moon, and I can definitely agree with that, especially since this is actually my brother. So we had it back in the day, and we had a subscription to Nintendo Power magazine, and sending out the extra magazine one a month called Nintendo Power Advance. So that was just like a weird little side thing that they did back in the day. And one was all about they had mini strategy guides, and one was Castlevania. So we ended up picking that up and trying it out, and that's how was both our introduction to the Castlevania series, actually.
So interestingly enough, that's the Game Boy Advance is where I got into Castlevania as well.
But not with Circle of the Moon, right?
No, I was Area of Sorrow, Aria. But
right.
Go on, yes.
So the comment is a little too long to actually read off in full. So I'm going to cut off there, but I think now that we're half an hour in, we should probably go to the topic at hand.
Well, I was actually going to say, and hi, Josh's brother, shout out to you. The comment is very appropriate for the situation because I was actually going to ask, what was your kind of origin with the Game Boy Advance? Do you remember like the first games that you got? Was it Castlevania?
I honestly don't remember the first Game Boy Advance game I had. I played my Game Boy Advance a lot. I had the see-through clear one.
Yep.
And my brother actually had the purple one. But I do not remember what games we had for the life of me. I've aside from Castlevania, Circle of the Moon, I cannot. And we had Aria of Sorrow. We did have the Four Swords with Link to the Past.
I'm not.
But I can't think of anything else.
I know that I very remember when I learned about the Game Boy Advance, because prior to, me and my Game Boy, just the best of friends. So to find out that there was this new console coming out, and the game that made me want the Game Boy Advance more than anything, which goes to show that I did not get a Game Boy Advance at launch. I got it a fair bit after, but I saw a commercial for Golden Sun, and it blew my mind that this is on a Game Boy. Like, this looks incredible. And then it also was this huge, obviously over dramatic, cinematic trailer. It was actually really cool because it's I think there's an opera going on, and there's these winged skeletons or something flying down, and then the chandelier turns into a dragon. None of this is in the game. and And then it shows like a little bit of the gameplay footage, which is of course what I care about more, and I see it. And like the action scenes in Golden Sun are pretty dynamic. So I was like, I need it. I need it more than anything. And the hilarious thing about Golden Sun, this is a little bit of a weird side thing, but that dragon chandelier actually ended up becoming a summon in the later game for the DS that came out like 10 years, just as like a cute little wink to that commercial. So
that's cool.
I'll never beat
I
that
like
game,
that.
though. It's just not very good. The first two are great. The DS one, it falters a little bit. But, so that was the thing that, like, that's what I'm asking for Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually ended up getting Golden Sun later. And with my Game Boy Advance, I got Mega Man Zero, which is great. Very difficult game for a child. Still difficult to this day. And Kirby Return... Was it Return? No, Nightmare in Dreamland, which is the remake of Kirby's Adventure. And, what a solid pairing of games. And again, following that trend of the Kirby follows me everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby... Nintendo can't go 2 years without releasing a Kirby game.
I'm okay with that. So... That would be,
if they're good.
That would be pretty much my introduction to the Game Boy Advance, and it was pretty much love ever since. I actually upgraded to the SP as soon as was possible. I didn't get the micro right away, but it is definitely one of the high points of my collection now. It's dumb. It's the dumbest thing ever, but it's actually kind of really nice. So
it's like a novelty.
It is very much a novelty, and I think they knew this at the time, but it has the best-looking screen of any of the models, but it's also funny. Really small. Like, the screen is actually smaller, so if a complaint about the Game Boy Advance, the screen crunch, it's not going to help, which, yeah, that was my my introduction to it, and like I said, it's been love ever since. I've got a nice collection of them. Now it's a little bit too pricey to, collect for retro games, but I will still always... The Switch Online is a blessing. I hope they start getting some really obscure stuff like they did with this SNES, because... Well,
I know that they are going to be... They said that they're going to be putting Golden Sun on there, so I might actually give that a try once that becomes available.
I'd recommend it. It's a great, great game. It's got its flaws. If we ever get into greater details, I will go into that. But it's definitely a solid RPG. So, but...
And it's one of those things, like, as much as I rag on turn-based combat and all that kind of stuff, they still hold a special place in my heart because, well, I don't particularly like the gameplay. I understand that a lot of them are fantastic games. Like, I doubt I'm ever going to play Suikoden. I doubt I'm ever going to actually beat some of the ones that were on PS1. But I can recognize that they're still good games. Like, there's a reason people love them.
Deep down, you're a diehard RPG fan. It's just the stuff that's part of it is a little bit daunting.
To get through it, I hate it.
Yep. But yeah, let's actually dive into some of these launch titles. What do we got here?
Well, before that, if anyone has any comments for the next episode, we will be posting it on Twitter and Instagram, just like we did this week. Or you could always email us at optionalbosspodcast@gmail.com.
And
so, to start off with the Game Boy Advance launch title, we have Army Man Advance. It's a top-down shooter.
This game looks adorable. It doesn't look good, like, at all. But... to be fair, Army Men has never been a franchise that's ever been particularly good, but I've always had a lot of fun with it. Like, I know I played a lot of Sarge's Heroes on the N64.
That was on N64?
Yeah, and, like, that was the kid who didn't have GoldenEye. That's what he would have, was Sarge's Heroes. And it had really fun third-person multiplayer and all that. This seems more like, it's a top-down shooter. I really don't know how much more I can say about that. It doesn't have, it's not like, the kind of kill everything on screen. It does seem like it's actually like, you are on missions. You have to, like, go through buildings and complete objectives and all that stuff. And I feel like it would probably be a fine time for sure. Oh, this is when I should get into a very important disclaimer. Neither Josh nor I have really much to any experience with these launch titles.
No, surprisingly, the launch titles are not all that
It's
great.
As you're all about to learn, this is okay. They're not bad, but it's not like, Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, Okay, maybe not the next one. We'll get there.
They aren't the hard-hitting titles like you'd see on a Super Nintendo or even an NES.
Yeah, they're not all, greatest hits. But that doesn't mean that they're all bad. And do you by chance know? I think 3DO was the ones that made Army Men, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's just a random thing to throw on there, and it looks like a charming top-down game. It doesn't look like anything I would be jumping to play, right? Like, if I was a kid, I'd have a fine time. Now it's like, I'm not... I need Army Men Advance, So, it's fine, is what I would say. It looks fine.
Yeah, it is actually, like, seeing this entire list, it's a little bit of a letdown. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I mean, there are some good ones in here, so...
What about the next one? I don't think this next one's a letdown.
No, it's not. Published by and made by Konami, Castlevania Circle of the Moon. We were just talking about this. And personally, I still like it. I think the dual... the DSS system, I think it's called. It's like where you mix and match cards. I think it's a little gimmicky, but at the same time, like, maybe it's because I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, nostalgia-driven, straight up. But I still like Castlevania Circle of the Moon. This might be a good opportunity to bring up Konami. Release a physical of the Advance Collection, please.
Oh, yeah.
And
we got to keep kicking that horse as much as we possibly can.
It's already dead and buried, and I'm still kicking the dirt.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's Castlevania. It's one of the first Metroidvania styles of Castlevania. So obviously we got Symphony of the Night, I think was the first one.
I think this is actually the first one after Symphony of the Night. Yeah. Now it did.
I think so. Yeah.
It did go back to a couple of your previous Castlevania trappings in the sense that in Symphony of the Night you had access to a different roster of weapons and all that kind of thing. As where I don't think you only get the whip in this one, which is nice. I mean,
yes.
it goes back to that classic Castlevania formula, and I think you can equip a few things, like, there's armor and maybe an accessory, but I can't remember much. But yeah, like you said, the whole gimmick to say would be the DSS system, and if I'm not mistaken, it was like one card was a certain attribute, the other card was like an element. Like, for example, you'd equip one card and that allows you to, like, spin your whip, and then the other card you could pick fire, so it'd be like a fire spin, right? And
yep.
There wasn't...
Or just a straight-up fire whip.
Or something like that, yeah. And I think that the fact that you can mix and match those stuff makes the game so good. It allows for such a level of customization. And not only that, there are some combinations that just break the game in half.
Yes.
And now, that's so weird that Circle of the Moon came out first. So the reason I say
opposed to Harmony of Dissonance?
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because I guess maybe they didn't realize that the Game Boy Advance wasn't going to be backlit, or they just didn't realize how atrocious it was going to be. Because Harmony of Dissonance is the one that your character always has that disgusting blue glow around them, right? Which was done to compensate for how dark the screen was. So that's actually really surprising, but... Nonetheless, Circle of the Moon, though I haven't actually beaten it, I would say is the second best Castlevania on the Game Boy Advance. And definitely a solid time.
It is a good time.
Yeah. So.
Next up is a port of the 1999 Sega Dreamcast game Choo Choo Rocket.
So weird that it's a game or a Dreamcast.
Dreamcast?
Port. Yeah. But, so, interesting bit of trivia about Choo Choo Rocket. It is the first Sega published game on a Nintendo property.
Oh, is it really? I guess that makes sense, because this was around the time that Sega
just stopped
didn't
making
what
anything,
Nintendo did.
right? Yeah, they Nintendo-ted themselves, that's for sure. And okay, this is actually a surprisingly beloved game by its fans. It's not my kind of thing, because it's very puzzly, right? The best way that...
Yep.
What do you know about Choo Choo Rocket?
Not a thing.
Okay.
I know it was developed by Sonic Team.
Okay, well, basically the best way I can describe it is a top-down puzzle, not dissimilar to something like Lemmings. So you have all these mice, and they move automatically. They just basically go in a straight line, and you have to place down markers on the ground, turn them left, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like controlling, hamsters through a maze is the best way to describe what the gameplay is. And you need to get all these mice in the hole because there's these cats and other obstacles that will try to kill them. And I don't know if it's a get as many, and if it's like you have 20 mice and you get 10 in the hole, you beat the level and then you just get points. But all the same, it's just nothing but puzzles, right? And it's not for me, but I can very much see the appeal. And the cool thing is, it does have, and I'm not going to have this much insight on all these other games, but it does have a bunch of interesting multiplayer modes, right? Because you got to think, we're still talking the days of the link cable.
Yep.
So, Choo Choo Rocket, I don't have a lot to say about it. I do like the interesting bit of trivia. It's like the first thing that Sega gave Nintendo was this. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. I didn't know that.
And the fact that it's also a Dreamcast game, like as a Game Boy Advance game, I think this is perfect, right? It's a puzzle game. Puzzle games fit perfectly to the handheld moniker. The fact that this was a home console release that had online support is wild. Yeah, people, that's right. The Dreamcast could go on the internet, and it still failed. It was ahead of its time. I'm not a Sega fanboy, but I will admit when they were right.
I think Sega... This is a whole other topic, so I won't go too much into it, but I think Sega, if they tried again, like shortly after the Dreamcast failed, I think they might have been okay.
Sega's failings are nothing but bad timing, and we just simply live in the timeline where Nintendo won, and I'm pretty satisfied with how this timeline's been going. So I'm not, but I moving on.
It's fun to think about.
Yeah.
Next title is Earthworm Jim, which is a port of the '94 platform game.
This is a tragedy.
Have you played the GBA version of this?
No, and I'm so glad that I haven't. I was brushing up, watching a bit of footage of these games because I haven't played most of them. For as vast of my collection, maybe I say like I have thousands, but I have a good amount of Game Boy Advance games, right? I only have... let me double check here. I think I only have one of the launch titles, and I will say what it is when we get to it.
Okay.
Let's just have a quick little glance here. Yeah, from what I can tell, I only have one of the launch titles. So...
That's interesting.
Isn't it? Like I said... like
two if you include the Japan release titles.
Yeah.
Just English version.
I probably have more than that counting the Japan releases, but yeah, we'll anyway.
We'll save that.
Yeah. So I watched a bit of footage about the Earthworm Jim GBA port, and it is a mess. And it's not a surprise that this is from Activision. I mean, it's from Shiny Entertainment. They made Earthworm Jim, but Activision is the ones who handled this. And the audio is terrible. There's missing animations. It looks like it was running on Flash.
Ooh.
Yeah, it is a very compromised port. And I played a lot of Earthworm Jim as a kid. I'm not going to say, it's one of my favorite franchises, but Earthworm Jim, difficult, yes, but a solid game all the same. And it is kind of cool that this kind of, it foreshadowed things to come. And the one thing that the Game Boy Advance was almost like some people say to a fault, I think it was one of its benefits, but it was a port powerhouse. It was getting so many Super Nintendo ports in this life cycle.
Yeah.
Not really so much on the launch. So I think this might be the only straight up Super Nintendo port, or Sega Genesis, because it was also there, on the launch lineup. and they just phoned it in hard. It looks like trash.
That's too bad.
Yeah, so that's really all I got to say about Earthworm Jim. It's cool that like they tried, because it would have been solid to have Earthworm Jim on the go, but like, and it's got bad screen crunch. Like, it's just not.
That's too bad.
What's next?
Maybe they'd have more Earthworm Jim games if that didn't flop.
No, Earthworm Jim 3D is 100% what killed that franchise. Yeah.
Up next, it's Fire Pro Wrestling, a top-down wrestler game. I don't got much to say on this.
I don't know much about this one in particular, but I do know that the Fire Pro Wrestling franchise, if you had played any of like the Super Nintendo WrestleMania games or anything like that, you're getting something along those lines. However, the Fire Pro franchise is actually taken much more seriously as into like making a good game, not just throwing together a licensed wrestling game. And
okay,
I don't have,
that's good.
Like I said, I don't have a lot to say about the Fire Pro games, but they are actually, like, if you do like wrestling games, I was actually talking about this series not too long ago with someone. And yeah, Fire Pro is the way to go for that classic SNES style wrestling. Beyond that, though, I don't really know what else I could say about it. It's a wrestling game on the Game Boy Advance. I actually didn't. This is one of the ones of the launch title that actually managed to leave my radar, so I can't even say if the visuals are good. So I'm gonna say maybe look at it. Maybe.
Next up is the F-Zero Maximum Velocity.
This is why I had to cut myself off early. So it's saying, they don't have like the SNES lineup of launch titles.
Yeah.
Here's F-Zero back for another launch.
Yeah.
Which is
in one of its limited releases, because Nintendo has forgotten about the franchise.
It doesn't have its best friend Pilot Wings. That's the sad part. Which Pilot Wings would have been kind of cool on the Game Boy Advance, but all the same, if you like F-Zero and you keep complaining about how there's no F-Zero and you have not played this one, play this fucking game. And it's
good.
It's really good. There's not a lot to it. It's very bare bones, and I say that in comparison to later Game Boy Advance F-Zero games, because back in the day, I don't know if I've mentioned it or not, I think I've alluded to it, I emulated the shit out of the Game Boy Advance. So that would be where a lot of my fondness came for it. And I have played all of the F-Zero games, even ones that didn't come this side of the world, because they're racing games, except some of them are oddly RPG-ish, and I had to look up like translations to figure out how to win races, because it's the bad guy you have to lose. Like, there was racing quests. This is not that. This is very much like the Super Nintendo F-Zero, where it's like you have a limited amount of cars, and it's just pick your car, pick your circuit, pick your difficulty, play F-Zero. But it looks really good. Like, it looks like the Super Nintendo one, but almost nicer, with smoother graphics, just better technology, right? And music still top notch. It's F-Zero. It's a quote unquote new F-Zero Game Boy Advance, and I hope this one comes to the Switch Online. Actually, this I think would really like.
Yeah, it'd be good to check out.
It would satisfy that F-Zero sweet tooth that so many people have, and I just feel like Game Boy Advance again. People didn't really take it all that seriously. This one probably missed out, so it's cool that it's here. And then we have what?
GT Advance Championship Racing, another racing game.
Yeah, actually, the launch is surprisingly stacked with racing games. It's kind of weird, because it's not what comes to mind when I think the Game Boy Advance. And
no,
I've never played.
Not at all. It's the adventures.
I think the Game Boy Advance, for the people who like really got into it, the best reputation it would have would be for RPGs, because it was an RPG powerhouse, and old school kind of platformers and stuff like that, which is sick, because I love both of those. But GT Advance Championship Racing was developed by MTO, which is really weird. So, the Ministry of Transportation is the only thing that comes to mind. Which is even stranger because this is like just a racing simulation game. There's actual cars in it, like actual car manufacturers and models.
Okay.
Yeah, like, so this isn't getting re-released because it's got licensed content. It actually looks
Interesting.
pretty good. It does a pretty good job of having that like pseudo 3D effect. It's still very like Super Mario Kart Mode 7 looking in its racing, but like, the cars actually look like pretty decent pseudo 3D models, and there's a surprising amount of depth to it. Like, you can unlock all sorts of car parts and stuff. You can customize things down to like your brake pads and your oil filter. Like, again, don't know much about it. And from what I saw of the gameplay, like, the racing looks solid. Like, it was smooth.
Yeah.
You can't really say that till you get your hands on it, so, take that with a grain of salt. But for some super random, just very, like, racing game with cars, doesn't have any wacky gimmicks or anything like that. Looks pretty good. Yeah.
I'm not going to check it out.
No, probably not, but it did at least intrigue me. That's what I'd say about that.
But for people who are looking for a different type of racing game,
Look at it.
look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next is Iridian 3D. Quasi, like, wannabe 3D rail shooter.
Kinda, yeah. It would... You could say kind of like Star Fox, but actually what comes to mind when I look at gameplay of this, it's like Hyperzone, which is a less known example than Star Fox, but I feel a more accurate one. That said, so this was published by Majesco, and Majesco is one of those publishers that pumps out nothing but crap, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean everything's going to be bad. They just, they'll get a lot of those like smaller Japanese titles that we won't get, or just, shovelware titles, right? And this would fall into the camp of one of those random Japanese titles we didn't get. And it doesn't look bad. It doesn't interest me too much, but the graphics look pretty good. It's got a surprisingly like well detailed and lengthy like intro cinematic to whatever plot you need for this space shooting game. It's got boss fights. So
Okay.
you know what? For that kind of gameplay, that, Hyperzone, Star Fox, rail shooter kind of thing, doesn't look bad. Yeah, gonna say I care. But another thing about it, I didn't take note of this for everything, but for a game like this, because I looked up a full playthrough, there's all sorts of those on YouTube, and it looked like it was about a 40-50 minute game, which I think is perfect for the Gameboy Advance.
Yep.
You want a nice, like, car ride kind of game, short sessions. This looks solid.
For something in the style, yeah.
Yeah, and
It's kind of perfect.
It's also one of those ones, not my genre, to say the least, but for the Game Boy Advance, I feel like this would probably be one of the better ones of its style. So, another one that I'm going to say, look at it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yep. One that I have absolutely no opinion on. Konami Crazy Racers.
Oh, okay, because I have lots.
Okay.
Yeah, so Konami Crazy Racers, I have not played it. This is one that I'm really bummed out that isn't in my collection. This makes Mario Kart Super Circuit look like shit.
Really?
Yeah, this is easily, and it's a launch game. Like, fuck, Konami used to be so good. This is basically...
Yes, they did.
Smash Bros, but racing and Konami characters. I don't know them all because there's some really obscure stuff, but like, they've got like the Moai heads from Gradius. They've got Dracula from Castlevania. They've got Goemon from Mystical Ninja, and then just a whole bunch of other characters you're not going to know. But there's a surprising amount of extra stuff. I think they realized when they were making a game for the Game Boy Advance, like, these arcade racers are mostly multiplayer experiences, but this is a very single-player option. We have to account for the fact that, not everyone's going to have buddies with a copy and a link cable. So there's a surprising amount of, like, single-player content. You, like, collect money for, like, shops and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch of unlockable content. And as for the racing itself, it looks fantastic. Like, if you like Super Mario Kart, like that old style, this is a 100% need to check out like I think I should.
So you said that there's shops. What could you like tune up your cart and stuff?
Well, see, that's the thing, right? The shops seem to be like out of game, like out of race sort of things. I just saw that there was a shop. The videos I was watching didn't actually check it out, so I don't know.
Okay.
But it just goes to show that there's more to it there, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if there's like quests and campaigns and I don't know. For the little that I know about this one intrigues the shit out of me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my unintelligible ramble about Konami Crazy Racers, and it reviews really well. Like if you actually look it up, it is a pretty common opinion that like this makes Super Mario Super Circuit look shitty, and that's saying something.
That is saying something.
Yeah.
That's okay. That turned my opinion around a lot.
Yeah,
a bit. Usually when I see these kind of kart racers, it's like, okay, it's just going to be a knockoff, plain and simple.
So
just get part of the pie, right?
So
part of the market.
Consider yourself one of the enlightened ones, because like you said, you have no idea about this, and I feel like that's the case with a lot of people, and it's one of those who've played it go like, no, actually take this one seriously.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Next up is Namco Museum, which is a compilation that we didn't mention on last episode, consisting of Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Pole Position, and Dig Dug.
I'm not
this
surprised
actually we did have.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with its little purple logo and stuff on the or label, I should say.
This has Miss Pac-Man. That gives it a lot of merit these days, because that Miss Pac-Man's not easy to play anymore.
No.
Oh.
So, but it's just a compilation of a bunch of arcade games. So aside from that, it's one of those pick up, play, put down at your leisure.
I think
right?
I think that's a pretty solid thing to be for the Game Boy Advance, and it's kind of cool.
Yep.
I mean, this is again, as we may have mentioned in our game compilation episodes, like this was a time where like game compilations weren't really a thing. Like they were, but they were seldom. Now it's nothing but these collections of old stuff, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah. So the fact that you could get, what was it, 6?
5.
Okay, still, that's a nice handful of games just to have in the pocket on the go. I know for me personally, Miss Pac-Man's kind of cool, but I've never been like the biggest Pac-Man fan. But I love me some Dig Dug. Dig Dug is one of my favorite classic games. So that's kind of
Dig Dug is pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, but I don't think we really need to go into more details about 5 arcade games that have been around since the dawn of gaming.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. So next up is, I'm going to say this wrong, Pinobi Wings of Adventure.
I think you said it right.
Did I?
I don't know. I can't actually confirm that, so I'm going to accept that what you said sounds right.
A little bit of trivia for it. It's the first game developed by a company called Artoon. It's their first game.
Is it their last as well?
That much I don't know. I'm gonna find out.
I was gonna say, like, what else has
they've come out with a few things actually,
such as
Yoshi's Topsy Turvy.
Oh, that's not a good thing to have on the resume.
Yoshi's Island DS.
A little bit better, but not great.
I'm trying to think of some of these other ones that I've actually seen the name of. Those are the two that I came up with.
I can't say I'm sold. And from what I saw of the gameplay of this, I still don't think I'm sold. You know what's weird about this list, though? So we just got to... people have picked up. We're going in alphabetical order. We're already at P.
Yes.
This is incredible. This is nothing like the Super Nintendo launch year.
No, not... Well, we aren't doing the whole year.
Oh, God. We'd be here for days.
Yes.
Yeah, this is why we only tackled the launch. It's not like the NES where it was like launch and black box, or the SNES where it was like, well, we have 6 games or we have 60 games. No, we decided we would keep it short and concise, and this is what we've got today. And this doesn't look great, but I'm surprised it is our first action platformer on the thing.
That is a little surprising, actually.
Okay. I guess you could say Castlevania would be, but
Yeah.
All the same, like, they're surprisingly seldom on the launch, which is really weird because, like I said, this is kind of one of the genres I think of when I think of the Game Boy Advance. And I don't... over ambition.
They just took time to perfect.
Not... So this...
The launch wasn't the best.
I think this is one of those, like, I can't be upset with them trying to figure new things out. That's how we get wonderful things. This doesn't have, like, a very generic sprite, kind of like what you would think with sprites. It's more of the 3D rendered sprites, not unlike stuff like Donkey Kong Country and stuff, right?
Okay.
But they clearly, this was something that was very new technology and all that. And it's that weird kind of not so good looking style where everything's like almost shiny looking, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
It's a weird transition of, oh, they did it, cool, let's try it.
And it's one of those things where, like, it's so hyper detailed that everything just kind of looks smudgy and, like, the pixels are extra chunky due to it, and it just doesn't look great. And from what I've seen, so in Pinobi, you are a bee. Okay. And it seems to be that it's just a generic side-scrolling platformer. You kind of have, like, a Mighty Number 9 style dash. Oh, I shudder at the name of that. And I think your main way of harming enemies is just jumping on them, from what I saw. I don't know if you actually, like, unlock power-ups or anything, but, get to the end of the level, fight the boss. This is not a term I like to throw around. If people hear this and they want to prove me wrong about Pinobi Wings of Adventure, please do. But irremarkable is how I would describe my impression of this game.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound remarkable by any means.
Yeah. That's my thoughts on Pinobi.
Okay, what are your thoughts on Pitfall: The Mind Adventures, which is another port of the 94 platform game?
I wish it looked better. Is my thoughts.
Is it akin to the Super Nintendo one?
So I think it's a port
worse?
of it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is also, it was like on the Sega Genesis as well. Like, so I'm pretty sure it's a straight port. I've never played any iteration, but I remember, was this one of the Super Nintendo launch year games? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
But all the same,
It might have been.
it looks kind of cool when it's not on the Game Boy Advance. On the game.
So don't play the mobile port.
Oh, I don't like associating that word with my Game Boy. But yes, it's so everything looks really big. So I don't know if it's actually screen crunch or if this was like a design choice, but it's like that Sega. The best way I can describe what I saw, it was like the Sega Genesis Aladdin, which I know is a good game, but like that size to everything.
Okay.
And then shrink the screen down so it only fits Aladdin.
Ooh.
No, I don't like it. Also, I don't know if it's just a first level thing or the entire game, but I don't think there's music. It was just
Oh no.
just idle animal sounds in the jungle, and like, you'd swing your stick and it would be like whack, whack. But just silence going through the jungle. So I know Pitfall like is a very old franchise, and I know they've kind of tried to do some neat things with this. This just didn't look good, and I'm actually kind of disappointed.
just
about
doesn't
that.
match up.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, next one on the list is Rayman Advance, which is a port of the 95 game.
I have not, or at least to my knowledge, if I have not played much, but I've never really played the Rayman games. And I almost think that's a bit of a shame.
I've played one a long time ago.
One looks really good. I've heard it's very difficult, but
Yes. 1 and 2, from my understanding, are the good ones.
So 2 is the like first 3D
Great
one,
Escape.
right?
Depends on the version.
Okay, yeah,
I think.
But I think 2 was a 3D platformer. And I think that 1 and 2 are very different games, and both did what they did very well. And then they just didn't really know what to do with Rayman. I've heard, Origins? Came in within the last 10 years ago or so. Maybe even longer now, who knows. But I've heard that's a really good game. But Rayman 1 has always intrigued me, because like, it just looks like a solid platformer of the time, and it was an interesting time when, new IPs were coming out, and it was actually one of the ones that did pretty well. His weird floaty limbs kind of fuck with my head, but all the same.
But it is what it is.
Yeah. I'm surprised I don't have this, but I'm also not surprised I don't have this. I don't know. It's weird. Rayman is not one of those things that I think about, but I know it's good, right?
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, it's pretty highly praised.
I didn't look into this version because, it's Rayman 1. And yet, for some reason, I look into Earthworm Jim, and I'm glad I did because it's atrocious. So, my thoughts on this are Rayman 1 is a good game, but I'm genuinely terrified that this would have a really bad screen crunch problem, because Rayman was a pretty big character, those things were pretty detailed and stuff, right? And I feel like unless they try to, like, compromise it in some way, this would probably be a pretty rough one to play. So, I don't have a definitive answer on how I feel, but my thoughts are intrigued but very wary.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
It's one that could be good.
Could be
worth looking at.
Rayman has, some good notoriety, so hopefully he's better off than Earthworm Jim this time around.
One that I don't think I will check out, just because not my type of game. Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2, which is a portable version of the 2000 boxing game, which I believe was Sega Dreamcast as well and PlayStation.
So I played a lot of because this seems to be a sequel, thus the title Round 2, or maybe it's like just their way of naming the spin-off, but I had Ready to Rumble for N64, and I actually really liked it. I can't speak to it being great, but
I had it for the PlayStation.
Yeah, I don't remember it being bad. Like, it was actually a pretty fun, goofy, arcadey boxing game.
Yeah.
And this looks like a really, really bad knockoff of Killer Instinct.
That's
yeah.
You.
Yeah. Now, I can't really speak to how it plays. It looked like just like a generic fighting game, less than a boxing game, but I don't know, man. I was watching the footage and I skipped ahead a bit, and he was boxing against like a robot, and it's like I don't remember this in the N64 game, but I think it's just kind of watered down to be a pretty just generic 1v1 fighter for the most part, and
just kind of silly.
That is the one genre that does not work on the Game Boy Advance. There is not enough buttons.
No, not to do it well.
No, it's surprising for how many iterations of Street Fighter 2 there is. There's a reason why it never showed up on the Game Boy Advance. It did show up on the original Game Boy, but that was a bit of a different time. But
they learned then.
Exactly. Fighting games just don't really play out too well. So this is one that is goofy and dumb, and I don't think it's really one to recommend to anyone. From what I've seen, I could be wrong.
What about the next game, Super Dodgeball?
This is the one I have.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. I haven't played a lot of it. I picked it up. It was very cheap. At the time, it was one of those you go to some game stores and they've got their games nicely displayed in their case, and then sometimes they just have the little tray of their cheap ones. And this was in there. And this is a spin-off of the River City series.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it plays like a River City game, but dodgeball. And dodgeball, if you're gonna talk me into a sport, dodgeball is just not quite sport enough for me to actually think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Dodgeball is kind of quirky. And this is a solid dodgeball game because it is dodgeball, if I'm not mistaken, 3v3 dodgeball,
Okay.
Pretty standard stuff. And so if you have played a River City game before, I'm not about to explain how it's like to play a River City game, but it plays exactly like it. It feels the exact same. There's just dodgeball rules. So, and you can get special attacks and crazy spikes and stuff like that. This game is neat. There's not a lot to it. It is pretty much just, play your tournament, win, whatever. But this is fun. This is a very solid pick up play game. And it's one of the rare exceptions of an Atlas game not being expensive. So yeah, Super Dodgeball. It's a good time to be had by all. I highly recommend.
Weird comparison,
Right?
but I like it.
Right? Not even a comparison. That's just what it is.
Yeah,
It's
right.
the same characters and everything.
Weird turn of events, because I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, no, actually, it's funny enough. The River City series actually has a ton of sports spin-offs. So, yeah,
That's so weird.
yeah, but yeah, that's
Granted, I'm not a fan, so I don't know this, but that's still so weird. I like
River City's good. This is also good.
it. So next up is Super Mario Advance. Now this is a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 and Mario Bros.
Yeah.
Right?
The beginning of the confusing ass lineage that is the Game Boy Advance ports of the Mario games. That's
They didn't know what they were doing.
here's the rundown, and the worst part is like they got the whole. This is the whole title. Super Mario Advance, Super Mario Land 2 is the first Game Boy Advance game, which, admittedly, kind of cool that they wanted to shine the light on Mario 2. That's kind of sick because it's kind of underrated. Yeah, maybe underrated is not the right way to play it because it's like a lot of people. Super Mario Brothers 2, like that wouldn't exist without a reason. So
Yeah.
But
so it is Super Mario Brothers USA.
yes, yeah, you're plucking radishes out of the ground and all that, and it looks really nice. And also, like you mentioned, it does all of the Mario games for Game Boy Advance have a mini game like side option to play the arcade version of Mario Bros. It's actually really cool.
Yeah.
You can link them all together if they're different games. And yeah, this is just Super Mario World 2 with a touched up coat of paint and actually some exclusive
Super Mario World 2?
Oh, that's not what I meant. But Super Mario
Bros. 2.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
The second one for the NES ported for the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, it actually has exclusive content to it as well.
Oh, really?
This is the only appearance of Robo Birdo.
Huh.
Yeah, so I actually haven't...
This just came onto Nintendo Online too, didn't it?
If it didn't, I think it was one of the ones that got announced to come soon, yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually really looking forward to diving into this one just because I do like Mario 2, and it's a way to play it that I haven't. However, this is...
Robo-Birdo.
No, Robo-Birdo's the reason why I want to play it. I would need to see this because it's a monstrosity. But the problem with this, and I don't know if all of them do it, but I think all of them do it. It's the same issue like when I mentioned with the Minish Cap, that they added voice acting to.
Oh.
So every time Mario gets a power up, it's like, let's go. And like every time he gets hurt or dies, like, oh no, like it's bad. And not only is it just the bit crunch audio, and you got to think this is like for everybody. Toad just sounds like, I don't even know, but I don't like it. So it's a really good game. Don't play it with the volume loud.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, next game is a port. Kind of. It's the portable version of the 2000 skateboarding video game, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Is this not our last launch game?
It is.
It is. Okay, so what do you know about this one?
I know that I never cared for it.
Have you played it?
I have. But in comparison to, like, I've played what it was trying to imitate too.
Yeah.
I had what it was trying to imitate. And I'm pretty sure I rented this at Blockbuster once, and it's like, oh, I gotta check it out. It's not terrible for what it is for a handheld. I'd much prefer the PlayStation version, of course, but I mean, it's not bad. You still can do the tricks. It has like an isometric view to it, so it takes a bit getting used to, but once you do, it can be fun.
So I haven't played this one, but this is one that actually shows up on a lot of like top 20 Game Boy Advance game of all time games.
I could believe that.
It is apparently, it plays so nicely. Like, again, like you said, it is clearly very different than the actual console Tony Hawk's, but somehow that isometric view and how they went about it is so unique to itself that this version, it's not entirely just like a watered down kind of Tony Hawk. It's actually got a lot of its own to offer. And
yes, it is a much better version in comparison to opposed to what the Game Boy Color had for Tony Hawk.
The one for Game Boy Color is a lot more like Skate or Die. It's not good.
The one for Game Boy Color is very, very rough.
It's charming.
The Game Boy Advance one isn't bad. I mean, it takes some getting used to.
I have no interest in it just because I've never been too crazy about the whole skateboard games, but it looks like a good game. And it looks like if you want skateboarding, you want to do some ollies and something else skateboard related on the Game Boy Advance, this is the game for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the better skateboarding games.
Yeah.
I just personally don't think skateboarding games really translate to 2D all that well. But if you're going to do it, I mean, this is probably it.
I'll defend Skate or Die. It's bad, but it's funny. That's the launch. Yeah. So
that's the launch. Not a whole lot worth mentioning. It is too bad that I mean, we eventually got it anyways, but in Japan they got Mega Man Battle Network 1. That would have been cool.
I was just going to say,
did get it.
We could quickly, we won't go into the details, but you want to rattle off the ones for the Japan just for kicks? What we missed?
Sure, if I can say them.
It's just gonna say.
So its English version is Air Traffic Controller. Its actual name is Boku wa Kuoku Kanseiken.
Yes,
I probably butchered that a lot.
Yeah.
Translates to Air Traffic Control.
You're not gonna have any better with the next one.
Easy Talk Shokuen 1-6 concept.
Yep.
Don't know what that is, but it was one of the first games developed by ND Cube, who did the F-Zero Maximum Velocity.
They've done a lot of things. I think they're the ones that ruined Mario Party.
Oh, that's sad.
They made a fine F-Zero game for the Game Boy Advance,
though. Golf Master Japan Golf Tour.
Strange, but neat.
Yeah. J-League Pocket, which is a soccer game.
Moving on. We know what we think about soccer.
Kururin, which is actually... Yes, that is on the Switch Online now, isn't it?
Yep, and it's actually kind of sick. I'm not good at it, but it's a very unique puzzle game. It's like,
yes,
it's like the drag the stick through the electrical like fence sort of game, but with with like a biplane or like a helicopter. It's an interesting puzzle game.
So Mega Man Battle Network, we've mentioned that. Momotaru Matsuri
RPG, we're never gonna know.
Yeah, Monster Guardians RPG, we're never gonna know. Mr. Driller 2.
This makes me sad. This would have been sick on the Game Boy Advance.
Well, Mr. Driller is a PlayStation title, didn't you know?
So that's on a few things. That's for sure.
I'm making fun of the PlayStation Classic.
Oh fuck! Yeah, drop the ball there.
Napoleon. Real-time strategy game.
Is it like a board game or something? I don't know.
Now, okay, this is kind of neat. Mainly because I'm a Silent Hill fan, but play novel Silent Hill, which is it's a visual novel port of Silent Hill for the PlayStation 1, the first one.
There is a translated version if you ever want to look it up.
Yes, there is. Power Pro Kun Pocket 3, which is a baseball game.
I think this is like Konami's baseball. Like, it's actually a really big franchise in Japan, and it's just they come up with every year. And it's like a very just cute little anime style kind of baseball game that's like very successful. Can't really say more than that.
Neat.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Next they got Top Gear GT Championship.
Okay.
Trying to think if I missed something. No, I didn't.
Top Gear's a good racing game. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Tweety and the Magic Gems.
Wait.
Which is it's the last Looney Tune game published by Kemco.
I was just gonna say, why did they get this? And then I saw Kemco, and I'm like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
There's something else.
Winning Point,
Yes.
which is a horse racer,
Yes.
and Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters.
I have this,
which is a...
and I love it.
Do you?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
Okay. So random tangent. So for those who actually watch the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, everyone knows, like, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh's a show about cards, right?
Yep.
So there was a two or three episode kind of like mini arc where they ran into someone who's like, okay, but we're not going to play cards. We're going to play Dungeon Dice Monsters. And it was this whole new kind of concept to Yu-Gi-Oh! Just for these 3 episodes. And this is a Game Boy Advance game built around this game. And
neat.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into details, but like, this is such a really cool game. And yeah, Dungeon Dice Monsters. Damn, Japan had a pretty solid launch lineup. Now,
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Now,
because like they got some of the ones that we already mentioned, so I didn't bother mentioning them again.
and not all of these are
But-
exclusive. Like, I think some of the RPGs are, but you know, we did all right too.
And some of them came over afterwards.
Yep.
As well.
Yep. So
Just not on launch.
now that we've gone through the launch, because typically the burning question that I have is, what are you getting on launch? Because it's the Game Boy Advance, you know, a bit more of a budget system. Probably getting 2 games on launch, right? Now, not having any of our previous opinions that we just discussed, you are putting yourself back in the age of 2001. What are the 2 games that you're asking for with your Game Boy Advance? I'm willing to go first.
Yeah, you go first.
So, one is one that I would want, and I know I would be disappointed. But I would probably ask for Earthworm Jim.
Okay.
Unless I still had it for the Super Nintendo. Because like I said, I had it as a kid. But like if I didn't, that would probably be the one that I would ask for. And I would probably be sad. And probably Super Mario Advance.
Yep.
You know, like I'm saying, like, you know, no predisposed opinions. If I knew how much I love Castlevania, that would have been like top on the list, right?
Yes. So for myself, I'd probably say Super Mario Advance.
Yeah.
Because at that time I would know Mario.
Exactly.
Right?
That's kind of why I lumped it into like my group.
Yeah. And being Mario 2, I didn't actually have the second one, so we always borrowed it off my uncle.
That would have been like a new Mario almost.
Almost. Except we knew it. And it's on All-Stars.
Yeah.
But then this was on the go.
Yep. And it would yell at you.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Honestly, I'd probably go with Castlevania Circle of the Moon.
It does have cool looking box art. I could see
And
that being
it,
appealing to
it has a cool looking box art. Not a sports fan or wrestling fan or boxing fan, so that removed, or racing fan really, so that removed a lot of this list. Rayman, I know as a kid I had plenty of times that I could have picked it up and I never did.
PlayStation. Ew.
So-
I don't know what it is.
I had PlayStation though.
I did.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Pinobi Wings of Adventure. At this time and era, I would have been more in my teens.
I was gonna say,
right?
if
So
you
it's
saw
like,
that box art, you go, that looks lame.
that
you'd be
looks like
right.
it's for a kid.
Yeah.
Pitfall,
Eh.
box art wise, I don't know what that is.
Eh.
Konami Crazy Racers Racing Sports. Yeah, I'd say it was probably going to be Castlevania.
So that's a pretty solid pick. And I will
Regardless,
say,
even without any disposition to it.
I will say, as kind of like my bringing it all around full circle, closing kind of a statement on the launch, it's not a lot of quality. It's definitely quantity over quality, but it is a pretty wide net of quantity, which is kind of cool when you think about it. Like the launch of the Game Boy Advance did kind of have something for everyone. Doesn't mean they were all good, but
oh god, no.
I actually think like this is a really strong launch because they don't all have to land, right? But the fact that
no, they don't.
Does not matter who you are for the most part. You could go buy your Game Boy Advance, walk out with a game with it, and that is something to be said about a good launch.
So I'm going to throw you for a loop here. Just because I don't know when we're going to talk Game Boy Advance again. What is your favorite Game Boy Advance game?
Oh, jeez. This is a really, really hard question to answer.
So I'll go first.
Okay.
If we can include it, Mother 3. If we can't, then I'm going to say Castlevania Aria of Sorrow.
That's a pretty good one. I would say probably Mega Man 03, just because Mega Man, that's my stuff, right? Mega Man Battle Network 6 is a strong contender, but I'm always going to prefer the classic action platformer. So yeah, I'm going to say, at least at this very moment, I'm pretty sure, I have a different favorite depending on the day. But it is very much, it is a 10 out of 10 Game Boy Advance game. It's hard, but it's good. And now that said, though, because of all of this, because I got a lot of obscure stuff, we should probably come back to the Game Boy Advance one day and just talk a lot of stuff that people wouldn't have ever heard of. Because I've got what's a Robopon 2 and why is there two versions? Oh, yeah, I can go on about that. But I think as far as the launch, I can wrap this one up.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Everyone, hope you enjoyed the episode. This was a little bit of a more different type of launch title episode, and a little more portability to it, if you will.
Yeah, very, very applicable. So where can they find us?
You can find us over on Twitter and Instagram at OptionalBossPC. If you want to write into the show, we will be making a post about it, or you can just comment on one of anything, really.
Send us
we'll
an
see
email.
it.
Or
you can send us an email.
We'll put you in the spotlight.
OptionalBossPodcast@gmail.com. And that's it for me. Is that it for you?
I think I'm ready. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review if you haven't already. We want to hear your feedback. And we'll catch you next time.
Bye!